Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amidabutsu, Namo Amidabutsu, Namo Amidabutsu, Namandaps, Namandaps, Namandaps. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, thank you for joining me today on the first Dharma message of 2021. A Happy New Year is, of course, in order for today. So, Happy New Year, and I hope that everyone around you is doing well, is healthy, and holding it together as best they can. Today, we are, of course, celebrating Shusho-e service together, right? Shusho-e. Now, last night we celebrated Joya-e, and while we were not physically together, our temple had a Joya-e service that I hope you were able to attend last night. And of course, Joya service is probably best demarcated by the ringing of the bell, right? I'm sure that you guys remember you would go up to that bell tower and ring it 108 times. Joya means a gathering of night to dispel. That's kind of its historical meaning, right? The historical Buddha, Shakyamuni, taught that people have many faults, particularly 108 major faults. That's kind of a lot, but if we're honest with ourselves, that's probably true. And as we come to the end of another year, we gather together in a service to reflect upon the imperfections and, of course, the vow to free ourselves from the bondages of samsara. Each time that we strike that bell, we are symbolically casting off our imperfections, our ignorance of the past year. That's kind of the reason that we do that. And this is, of course, the big climactic moment of the service. And I love this experience, the symbolism of the action, and just going up there and wailing on a giant bell. You walk up there, right? It's biting cold, and you have your jacket all kind of tucked up. You have your collars up. It's a little bit chilly, by Arizona standards. And the person in front of you kind of stumbles up there. They meander up there, and they do 3 timid little strikes on the bell. And the sensei, of course, does quite little bow to them, and they do the 3 little pebbles into the wooden box to make sure that they're keeping count of everybody, and then they hand you the striker, and you hold it up. And you look at that thing, and then you look at the bell, and you look it back, and you raise it above your head into the sky, and you strike that thing. And it unleashes this dense, permeating, shaking sound that rocks you to your core, and you reflect. You think about all those feelings, those emotions, that baggage that you've been carrying around, and you cast it off. It's gone, right? And then you do it 2 more times, again and again. And I love it because that feels amazing. Like you just let this backpack full of bad thoughts and emotions and terrible decisions slide off your back, and you drop it off at the temple like you would, your old stuff in your house being dropped off at the church rummage sale or something like that. It feels amazing. And then you go inside, you talk to your friends, the other Sangha members, and you have a nice thick bowl of somen that's delicious. And then you get into your car and you go meet your friends and you have a great time because it's New Year's Eve. And you've left behind all that baggage and those thoughts from last year, and it's time to party, right? And that's it. Story's over, right? There's nothing else to do. You've already gotten rid of all baggage, correct? Of course not. We know that that's not really the case, because the story doesn't end last night. The story continues on, and you get to wake up the next morning. And when you do wake up the next morning in the real world with real consequences, your conscience feels clean maybe in the moment, but that next day, not so much. No one feels great New Year's Eve morning, right? The truth of the matter is that it isn't that easy to get rid of our gas, our greed, our anger, and our stupidity. That would be amazing if we could just choose to throw it all away and be done with it. Unload that bag on the side of the street, but that's just a pretty thought, and we know that it's not really that simple in real life. It kind of reminds me of that old euphemism that I'm sure that you guys have all heard before. You can never unring a bell, right? You can never unring a bell. And I think it's important to remember that. Those words that we said that maybe we didn't exactly mean, the ones that we said anyway, that we regret, they were still said. And the phone call that we didn't make, the one that we probably should have made to whoever that person might be, didn't get made. And all those thoughts you were carrying around last year, about the election or about other people or about the difficulties that we face in the world, we had those thoughts. And other people had those thoughts as well. And just because we're wishing them away doesn't mean that they didn't take place and we didn't have them. That grudge that you were carrying around, when you go back to the office or see that person again, it's still there. You might feel better about it for a little bit, right? Like we all feel a little bit better day after New Year's, but it's still there. And it takes time, and you have to work at it. All those angry ideas and thoughts that ran through our minds, the consternation that ran through us like a bad sandwich, it's not like they just disappear overnight. You know it, and I know it. We all know it. We cannot cast those all away forever by just ringing a bell and saying we are done with it. Because they're not really done with us. I wish we could, but we can't. You cannot unring a bell because what's done has been done. Now, that being said, it does not mean, however, that you do not ever ring a bell again. You just have to do it a certain way, right? And that's what today is all about. What do you do now? After the part that feels great, now what are you supposed to do? Well, last night is the last service of the year, but it's important to follow it up with today's service. These two are like peas in a pod. The last service of the evening and the beginning of the New Year service. They're part of the same in my mind. It's like the left and the right hand, of course, like coming together and making this full lesson apparent. Because last night is about recognizing our foolishness and ego and casting it off. And today is all about what do you do next? And that's harder. That's the harder part. And that's the part that we have to live with. How do we live again? What are those next steps that we are supposed to take? How do we deal with what has happened and how do we move forward? That's the question. Because 2020 was a bad year. I'm not sad to see it go, but it happened. And we are all part of that year. But today, in 2021, we now have to figure out how to move on from it and how to live with it. We have to learn how to live with it so that we do not make those mistakes again and those things do not happen again. We have to live with what happened, how we acted, how other people acted, and we have to do that together. Not as individuals, but as a whole. And this is really hard because it's work and it's a type of thing that isn't easy. But it's also exactly why we come to temple and why the Buddha is the perfect guidance for this sort of thing. Shusho-e's meaning is a gathering to make things right. A gathering to make things right. Buddhists across the world have embraced this tradition in recognizing that the best way to do that, to make things right, is to realize that Amida Buddha is always guiding us and will never abandon us, no matter how severe our faults might be, no matter how terribly the situation may appear around us. People come together all around the world and they make promises to themselves about how this year is supposed to look, how we can improve ourselves and the world around us. And especially in moments that are the most trying, the most challenging, where the circumstances seem stacked against us. It's the most important time to put your hands together and say the Buddha's name reverently, to look toward him for his guiding light in terms of what we should do and how we should live. And the answers are the teachings that we know and hold to be true. I know that seems simple, but if you really think about it, that's where it is, right? The golden chain. I will be kind and gentle to every living thing, protect those that are weaker than myself. The 6 paramitas, dana, sila, prajna. The 8th-fold noble path, holding right view, right speech, right mindfulness. These are the teachings, and they remain more essential at this moment than they've ever been before, or perhaps as important today as they ever have been before. And these are the guide for how we can do our very best and how we can move forward after everything that has happened. And in the spirit of Shusho-e, if we live by these teachings, the teachings of the Buddha, day in and day out, the weight of those actions do not weigh so heavy on us because we are being guided by the Buddha and his infinite wisdom and compassion. And our job is really just to reflect on that, live that way as best we can, and then you just put one foot in front of the other, again and again, again, mindfully, with gratitude. Even in times of great challenge, when the circumstances seemed against us, it is essential that we not be afraid to say what needs to be said, to do what needs to be done, to champion what we believe to be good and meaningful in our world according to these teachings. And of course, there will be consequences to our actions that we cannot know or see ahead of time. And of course, it can be scary to live in a world with those consequences, but the spirit of today teaches us that we can live with them as long as we do it with the teachings of the Buddha in our hearts, as our guide, as a Sangha, reflecting on the Dharma. Again, you cannot unring a bell, but that certainly does not mean that you stop ringing it. You ring the bell. We should all ring the bell and continue to ring it all throughout 2021. We just have to make sure that we do so mindfully, thoughtfully, with gratitude in our hearts and the teachings of the Buddha as our guide. Happy 2021, ladies and gentlemen. May it be a good year. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amidabits, Namo Amidabits, Namo Amidabits, Namandaps, Namandaps.